Alright, so to get one thing out of the way, if you've watched my longer video on Mr. Fantastic already, then you have seen most of this fight in one form or another already. However, because I sped it up for that fight and it was at the end of a very long video, there were some things I didn't go over and I wanted the chance to do that here. If you are not sure why certain things are happening with Reed's kit, I would direct you over to that video where I go over that in detail, but for now we're just going to be looking at just this fight. So we do have the She-Hulk synergy active. That's why we're getting those power stings. He's going to have low power for most of this fight, so that's not a super big deal. If I were to do it again, I'd probably bring a second Mr. Fantastic for the 30% attack. But this is what we have. So notice how there I hit into his block to give him power. I did not want to get to 10 charges because I thought that there was a chance that that would have pushed him all the way to his L2, and then that would have reset our careful study passives. I wanted him specifically to throw 3 L1s in a row. So now that that's done, I have my extra. For me, it's 35% power gain. This would be even easier if this were a SIG 200 read and it was all of 50%. Notice how I'm stacking those there because it's more debuffs for me and thus more attack. Suppression also keeps him under control. Debuff siphoners mean that my shocks do more damage. And Petrify means that once we get him over into his last 15%, we're going to fully turn off his power gain. Now, we are still getting some specials, so we are still benefiting from those power stings, but what I'm doing here, first and foremost, is parrying and then either reparrying if he keeps going, or using my heavy to counter his heavy if he chooses to heavy. The idea being that we want to stick to heavies because they give us the most power possible per hit. Because Iron Man Infinity War is a tech champion in the Abyss, every 9 of our landed hits he's going to steal all of our power, as long as he has an armor up. Reed does not have any ability accuracy modification in his base kit, and he does not have any way to armor break, so that armor up is staying there, and thus we will be losing our power. He's not actually going to steal it anymore because we have 3 Petrifies up, and so he will actually lose power when we get to 10, but we will still lose ours. So because of that, we are sticking to heavies because it lets us build all the way to those L3s. The L3s then give us a passive Fury for every debuff on the opponent, and remember, careful study passives count as 3 debuffs. And then those Furies boost the passive damage that we're doing because we have the full Fantastic Four team, which is why this is just doing a ton of damage. Now, I don't think for that first one I really lined everything up perfectly to get the biggest possible Fury, but you'll notice as we go through this that what I am trying to do is throw the L3 after landing a parry so we have the weakness up, and after reparrying to get that stun, because both the stun and the weakness will count as a debuff, and that will make the Furies from the L3 that much stronger. See, that time I mistimed some of the reparries, but you can see just how good Mr. Fantastic's evade chance is, because it just backed me right up. The only times that I didn't evade were the ones where Infinity War Iron Man's own abilities turned off the ability to evade completely. But because I was getting backed up by those evades a little bit, I did decide to throw it even without the stun. So you notice that after we come out of that L3, we still had 9 charges, so our next heavy did cause him to steal whatever power we did have, but you'll also notice that his power dropped when that happened, like I mentioned. And then we just go back into our same cycle, because look at this, if I let him, before I even land my next heavy, he's already at, he's only at 7 charges, not even 8. Mr. Fantastic has so much power gain for this kind of fight. This doesn't come up in a lot of shorter fights, but this is why I am so glad that I have my read at such a high sig. Not because it comes up all the time, but because when it does come up, especially for something that's counting your hits like this, and because he only has a one hit heavy, and even his specials don't have too many hits in them, it means that where that power gain does come in handy, it allows him to do some truly bonkers things. Like, this is a relatively low hit count overall for how much damage I have done to this defender, and that's not even accounting for the fact that L3s do add to the hit counter, right? But look how far down he is with only, 90-something hits. Now, if we want to look at the actual number of hits that this really has been, we can look at those skirmish charges on the defender for the Abyss, and notice that he still has 42 left, and that's with the coward timer going off a couple times. So that means that we are not even halfway through our charges, and it took us a while to get set up. From here on out, we don't have to throw any L1s, we don't have to throw any L2s, we don't have to mess with any combos or any of that, we can just do heavies, which means that this is not the most riveting fight, but it is completely under control, and it is extremely efficient for how many hits we're actually landing. See, that one didn't go quite as well. It kind of depends on how many hits you block versus how many times he goes for the heavy and you intercept that. That's why sometimes I've been all the way to 7, and sometimes I've only been at 7, and sometimes I've been at 9. But you safely get to the L3 every time. Notice how, as we've gone on, I've gotten a little more comfortable with making sure I have that stun as well as the weakness up. And so the Furies are getting stronger and we're doing more passive damage. I've also decided that because the parries kind of throw off my reparry timing personally, I can do it with some champions. It's a little harder with others, and I just wasn't nailing it with this one. So I did back off and let that coward timer run out and lost some charges because of it, because I was sure that I wasn't going to be in any danger of running out of charges even so. See, there we go. We get the parry for the weakness and then the reparry for the stun, 2 extra debuffs, 60% more attack on this passive Fury. When you take into account that his buff gave him 10% extra attack on that passive Fury per debuff, and he currently has 13 debuffs on the opponent, actually 14 when you count the stun when I throw the L3, that's another 140% of his attack from using that L3. It's not that it wasn't useful before, but that is a really sizable bonus. And because of that, I think that this solo, while possible before, definitely would have been harder, and you probably would have seen some people do it with suicides or boosts. This is neither of those. There are a lot of L3s in this fight. I don't think I'm in danger of getting as tired of it as I am of Doom's L3 animation, but I definitely saw it more making this video than I did to do everything else. So, there I get hit. I already made this joke on the other video, but the benefit of it is that it does get me closer to courage range, in which case I'll actually be doing even more damage. I believe I am running 3 points in courage at this point, which means that when I do drop below 50% due to block damage and thanks to those hits, I'll be doing 20% extra damage on top of everything else. So notice we just went from skirmish to warfare charges, and he's at 41%, And as I said, it did take us a while to get rolling. So we are actually way ahead of the pace needed for a solo. Again, no suicides, no boosts. I don't think this team is very practical, as I said. I do think this fight is fun. It is a good way to, be rock solid on your reparries. It's a pretty good way to get used to read the intricacies of his kit. And the reach on is heavy and fighting Iron Man Infinity War in general. But unless they do what some of us kind of jokingly suggest at times, unless they end up actually making, a sixth slot available for quest teams, I don't think you're ever going to clear Abyss with this full team. See, he actually got to his L1 there. I guess it was probably because he landed hits. I think they also gain some more power, though. When they go into the second mode, I know they gain more attack, because now I've just crossed below 50%. And that's why. I was barely taking any block damage before it graduated from skirmish to warfare, and now I am. But if I hadn't eaten that combo, I still don't think I would have dropped below 50% by the end of this fight. I will point out, you see the little force field there. The invisible woman part of the synergy is a huge part of that. Dramatically better block proficiency and perfect block chance for the whole team. And so that's why he is looking just so tanky. But I think what I started to say earlier is that if they did add a sixth team to questing teams and they made it retroactive for content like this, then I might actually try an Abyss run with this team, because the full Fantastic Four includes Reed, obviously, but it also includes Torch, who's good for a ton of fights. You would bring along Doom then for all of the fights where you need a Mystic. Doom would have access to an armor break because of Reed being on the team. Reed would have those 3 points in Mystic Dispersion effectively because Doom was on the team. And then you could throw on somebody like Aegon. You could definitely do Abyss on the backs of those 4 champions. Anyway, with that, I'll just let this play out for the rest of it. Hope you guys enjoyed seeing this. It is a long fight, but I know that I have trouble tracking things sometimes when they're at double speed. That other video didn't need to be any longer, but for those of you who wanted to see the full fight, here it is. Catch y'all next time.